Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the second part of our whole new DVD series, which is called The Secrets of the Illuminati. We are at part 2 of this DVD series, and it's called America's Occult Holidays. Now, we know, according to the scriptures, in Genesis chapter 1, verse 14, it says, "And God said, Let there be lights in the firmament of the heaven to divide the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years." So the calendar had been established so that man could indeed measure the seasons, grow crops, and live a good life. However, ever since the infiltration of the Illuminati into Europe, into America, and throughout the rest of the world, things became twisted and perverted according to their occult religion, which is known as Luciferian witchcraft. Now, in the first part of this DVD series, which was called The Revival of the Antichrist, we had shown that there was a numerical pattern that the Illuminati had operated by and through which they created the two great seals of the United States of America. Now, using a similar pattern, and they will use these patterns that can be tracked once you know what they are, they twisted and perverted the calendar to fit into their belief systems. And this is what we're going to start off with. And throughout the rest of this DVD, once we go throughout that, we're going to examine just how bad their infiltration into not just American society, but throughout the rest of the world through holidays. And even by its own definition, holidays is nothing but holy days. But we will get back to that. For now, let's begin with the major Sabbaths. Now, as I said before, the Illuminati, they observe 8 major nights in which they perform human sacrifice. The 8 nights of human sacrifice are December 21st, which is the night of Yule, February 1st, Imbolg, March 21st, Ostara, May 1st, the night of Beltane, which is the second highest night of human sacrifice on the Illuminati calendar, June 21st, Litha, August 1st, Lughnasadh, September 21st, Mabon, and from October 29th through the 31st are the nights of Samhain, or what some people refer to as Halloween. This is the number one, the highest night of human sacrifice on the Illuminati's calendar. Now, there are 4 major seasonal markers that all people go by, especially those who are farmers. Those 4 nights, which the first one would fall on December 21st, which is the winter solstice, March 21st, which is the spring equinox, June 21st, which is the summer solstice, and September 21st, which is the autumnal equinox. Now, when we take a look at how the 8 nights of human sacrifice had been arranged on our calendar, you're going to find something very, very interesting. The winter solstice is on December 21st. Now, from that date all the way to February 1st, which is a human night sacrifice of Imbolg, there was a period of 6 weeks in between. Now, from February 1st to March 21st, there was a 7-week period. And this repeats itself all the way through the calendar. It goes 6-7, 6-7, 6-7, 6-7, all the way through the calendar. Now, this is very significant because if you remember, when we had studied parts of numerology and gematria in the Arrival of the Antichrist DVD, we found out that the number 6 is a number for man, 7 is a number for God. In essence, what they are doing here in their occult holidays, they are placing man above God. And this gets even more in-depth because when we take a look at it once more, we find out that 6 and 7 is 13. We have another 13, 13, 13, 13 pattern running throughout the entire calendar. And these 13s, these multiples of 13s, if you recall, were found also on the back of the $1 bill on the two great seals of the Illuminati, which we proved were not the United States, but they are, in fact, belong to the Illuminati. So you can see already, just through their numerical pattern, and how they perverted the original intention of God into 8 nights of human sacrifice. And that, numerically, it all adds up perfectly. Now, going throughout the calendar, we can find out and add other things to the calendar. Similar days that we observe. One would be Christmas, which is traditionally held on December 25th. Then we have, of course, Groundhog's Day, and then, of course, there's May Day. These three fall exactly on those nights of human sacrifice. And, of course, last but not least, Halloween. But other days had been added. The Illuminati's intention was to truly pervert our calendar and to place their sacred days on it, but they guised them. Take a look over here, ladies and gentlemen, very carefully. You'll find out that among the other days that have been added, we now have Inauguration Day, which is on January 20th. Now, interesting enough, Inauguration Day, which we have the new president take his oath of office, that was originally held in November. This was purposely brought up to January 20th so that it could fit in with this numerical pattern. Valentine's Day is on February 14th. That's been added. April Fool's Day, which is on April 1st. Over here, and we'll get back to this, was the 1996 Olympics game. Then, of course, we have, among other things, now on July 4th was Independence Day. And then on the night of Mabon, we have the end of the 2000 Olympic Games. Now, what is so significant about the placement of those particular days? The reason they were placed in their particular position was so that they would fit in with this 6-7-13 pattern. And we're going to go over that right now. You'll note that Inauguration Day, which is on January 20th, is exactly 13 days before the human night sacrifice of Imbolc. Valentine's Day, which is on February 14th, is exactly 13 days after the human night sacrifice of Imbolc. We'll get back to Easter in a bit. April 1st, or All Fool's Day, is exactly 13 weeks from the beginning of the calendar. Over here, let's see, Independence Day is exactly 13 days after the human night sacrifice of Luther. Now, with the 1999 Olympic Games, which was on July 19th, 1996, that was exactly 13 days before the human night sacrifice of Lunarsad. And, if you notice, the end of the 2000 Olympic game ended on Mabon, or I should say on the human night sacrifice of Mabon. And of course, Halloween is exactly on the human night sacrifice, the highest and holiest of all days for the Illuminati, October 31st. Now, let's get back to Easter for a second. Now, Easter is a very interesting day. You see, supposedly, and I do say supposedly, Easter is supposed to be when Christ resurrected from the dead and after he paid for our sins on the cross of Calvary. Now, in order to measure this, this is how the Catholic Church, and this is the Catholic Church now, This is how the Catholic Church came up with trying to figure out the day of Easter. Because if you notice, it's always changing. It's not a fixed day. And the reason is because what they will do, they will turn to the human night sacrifice of Ostara, which is March 21st. Now, the next thing they will do, they will wait for the next full moon after March 21st. Whenever the first full moon is after that, the first Sunday after that full moon is when Christ was supposed to have resurrected. So in other words, they are using a forbidden occult practice known as astrology to determine when Christ had resurrected from the grave. This is their explanation from it. And if you don't believe me, ladies and gentlemen, you just go to your calendar, next time around, see when the next full moon is after March 21st, and I guarantee you the Sunday after that is going to be when Christ supposedly resurrected. But that's how they determined it. I did not. Now, something funny has been going on with the Olympic Games ever since we celebrated 100 years of the modern day Olympic Games, because it started back in the modern days in 1896. And in 1996, something changed. The Olympic Bowl no longer was a bowl. Take a look, ladies and gentlemen. At the top of that scaffolding is what the newspapers, and this is what the newspapers reported, they called this the Olympic Cauldron. Now I want you to take a good look at this, because you notice it is, first of all, a red cauldron, because it refers back to the red shield of the House of Rothschild, and it had 18 jet flames, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6, and it is properly referred to as a cauldron. This is what the newspapers called it. This is how they referred to it. And this is one of the newspapers from that time, 1996. I want you to take a look very carefully, ladies and gentlemen, because off in the distance is that Olympic cauldron. This is what was now lighting the night skies in Atlanta. It's no longer an Olympic bowl, it is a cauldron. But it didn't end there. You see, in the 2000 Olympics, well, I should say, in the 1996 one, we had something else that was going on. At the opening of the games, this might be a little hard to see, because it's black and white, but these gold creatures were being summoned up to bless the Olympic Games. Those gold creatures are actually the spirits of the Olympic Games, and they are referred to as Nikes. Now, when we get back to what else was going on, it gets very, very interesting. Now, going and taking a look at the official logo of the 1996 game, you will notice that there are 3 stars here and a crescent moon. If you recall, in the first DVD of this series, which was called The Arrival of the Antichrist, the most ancient symbol for Semiramis was a crescent moon, and the most ancient symbol for her son was Nimrod. Here we have the star and the crescent moon of Nimrod and Semiramis. And what's even more interesting is a master witch, or a third-level witch, will have 3 stars and a crescent moon as their insignia, because it denotes their rank in the occult world. In the 2000 Olympic Games, we have now Semiramis holding the laurel wreath, and it is Semiramis, the goddess herself. And what's even more interesting is that since the Olympic Games are Greek in origins, I ask you this: why are there 4 Roman horsemen and horses here. These are actually the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse as far as art determined. These have absolutely nothing to do with this Greek goddess. However, they were purposely placed there anyways. But it gets even more interesting because at the opening of the 2004 Olympic Games, we have these ladies dressed in virginal white, and this is what was reported now, opening up with a pagan ceremony to welcome in the spirit, I should say, of the Olympic Games, which we've already identified to as Nikes. But here we now have the ancient pagan ceremonies being performed. And here is, of course, one of the coins that was printed for this for the Olympic Games. And here we have that spirit, again, one of the Nikes. Now, when we get to the 2008 Games, the Beijing Games, it gets very, very interesting. Things have changed drastically because take a good look at this Olympic torch. Rather bizarre, if you ask me. It doesn't even really remind me much of a torch, hardly, because of the top. You know, something seems to be missing. But when you look at the spires, right here, the way they spiral, those are all 6s. Take a good look at those, ladies and gentlemen. If we were just to turn it, and I'm going to turn it like this, upside down, to make it easier for you. Notice they are all become 6s. Literally speaking, the torch of the Olympic game, the 2008 Beijing game, was completely covered in 6s. And you can see it very clearly here also. And one of those Olympiads who carried the torch can be seen carrying, right here, the torch, all those 6s. And what's even more interesting, when we take a look at the Olympic cauldron, that time around, you will note, ringed all around it are those same 6s. Those are nothing but 6s that completely go around the Olympic cauldron. Now, these represent the various logos, different colored logos, for the 2012 Olympic Games that's going to be held in London. Now, I have to tell you, for all the logos I've ever seen in the Olympic Games, these are certainly among the most bizarre. I mean, I can barely make out that they are supposed to be 2012. Now, when we look at the larger version of one of them, you know, it's supposed to be 2012, and whatever this centerpiece is supposed to be here. Who knows what that's supposed to be? Unless we take another look at this. Remember, this is supposed to be the 2012 logo for the Olympic Games in London. When we take a look and break this down, it becomes a Z, an I, and there's that centerpiece, an O, and an N. It actually spells out the word Zion. Now, I'm not talking about those people who are into moving, into giving Jerusalem its own permanent homeland, free from terror and everything, that type of Zionism. No. We're talking about those people, the Illuminati, who have been trying to create a Zionist conspiracy. And by that, they are not Jewish by practice. True Jewish people wouldn't be involved in any of this. The Illuminati, their center of power in Europe, one of their major places is in London. And it's in a square mile of England known as the City. I know, I'm from, England. Well, anyways, it is the bankers, the ones who's actually pulled off this whole event to get the Olympic Games brought to London in the year 2012. But it is also the bankers who's trying to take control of everything through the central banks that they've established, through their religion and through their politics. And their politics involve the belief of Zionism. That's why it's been designed like this. Now, as much as they have perverted the calendar and the original intention and the pattern of it, a lot more has happened. We are now going to take a look into their Sabbaths, which they've disguised and we've embraced as Christian holidays. We're going to take a look at each and every single one carefully, and then, quite honestly, you're going to be responsible to God for all the information and the knowledge that you've just learned. I only hope that you do the right thing by it. We are now going to examine the wonderful holiday known as Christmas. Now, what could be possibly wrong with having the spirit of goodwill towards men and all this? Well, if you understand the truth behind the Christmas story, you're going to find out that the whole thing is wrong. When I was a child, I remember when my father used to take us out to the woods, and we would take an axe, we would find a nice full pine tree, and we would cut it down, we would drag it through the snow, we would bring it in the house, much to my mother's protest, because there'd be pine needles and snow everywhere. And then we would set it up on one of those metal stands so that it wouldn't move. We made sure it was really good and solid. And we would deck it with gold and silver trimmings and everything. And of course, put the traditional 5-pointed star on top of it. And this is what most people, if they're from my generation, and most people nowadays, would have gone through that. I'm not saying that you will go out and cut down a tree. No, a lot of people like going for the artificial stuff. So what could possibly be wrong with the Christmas tree? Is there anything unbiblical or ungodly about it? Well, according to the Bible, in Jeremiah chapter 10, we pick it up in verse 1. It says, "Hear ye the word which the Lord speaketh unto you, O house of Israel. Thus saith the Lord." And folks, I want you to memorize these next 7 words. "Learn not the way of the heathen, and be not dismayed at the signs of heaven, for the heathen are dismayed at them. For the customs of the people are vain." Now listen very carefully to this. We're in the middle of verse 3. "For one cutteth a tree out of the forest, the work of the hands of the workmen with the axe. They deck it with silver and with gold. They fasten it with nails and with hammers, that it move not." Ladies and gentlemen, that's a Christmas tree. And right here in God's own word, he says, "Learn not the way of the heathen." When the heathen are the ancient occultists, they're also known as pagans. You are not supposed to be practicing any of this. God's own word makes it very clear not to be involved in this. And yet, there are going to be those people who's going to try to convince you, well, God's not talking about a tree here. He was referring to a plant or to something else. I've heard these arguments over and over and over again, ladies and gentlemen, and quite honestly, at this age, I'm sick of it. Because God's word makes it very clear. These people have gone out, they cut down a tree, they brought it home, they fastened it so it didn't move, they put all types of gold and silver decorations on it, they decked the halls with it, and this is exactly what we're doing to this very day. So don't tell me that this is something other than a tree, because this is exactly what those pagans were doing then, and that's exactly what we're doing now. And when we take a look just at one of these pictures, this is exactly what the Bible had been talking about. People had been trimming it and decking it with gold and silver and all these wonderful, beautiful items that are on it. The pagans, among other things, they would put little pieces of cake, candy, and sweet items on it. This is why to this very day we're putting candy canes and other things like that on it, because it's part of the ancient pagan practice of honoring the winter stag god. Now, as I just stated, Jeremiah makes it very, very clear that Christmas trees are not supposed to be observed. They have absolutely nothing to do with anything that is good or godly. So then the question is, why are we doing it? On top of the Christmas tree, and just about most Christmas trees, you will find that there is a 5-pointed star. Now the question is, why do we have, such an item on top of our trees? If you recall, well, there's many different candies, little cakes and offerings and such here. All this is here because it goes all the way back to Nimrod. Nimrod himself, as depicted here, this is one of the ancient depictions on a relief of Nimrod. Nimrod himself, if you remember, was the stag god. He was considered the winter god. And just like at Rockefeller Center, where they have these huge Christmas trees every year, all lit up, at the top you'll find the traditional 5-pointed star. Now, interesting enough, at the base, in front of Rockefeller Center, whose address is 666, mind you, and it's no accident, because if you've ever gone to that building, and I've seen it and been there before, the very top, these huge neon lights, there are 3 red 6s that will glow at night. But at the base of this tree is a statue, and that remains there all year. And let me show you a larger version of this. That statue is the statue of Prometheus. Now, Prometheus, if you know your ancient Greek legends, was the one who stole the fire of illumination from the gods and brought it down to mankind. So mankind now had illumination or the enlightenment of wisdom. He stole the fire from the gods. So, why are there, among other things, Christmas lights on the tree? Well, you see, there's a lot of history behind this. You see, in the old days, people from the old world, like me and others, and from the ancient days, and the people who are practicing the occult to this very day, candles would be put on top of the trees, among other things, because it was the dark times. This was a season of the year in which most of the sun was gone and it was constantly dark out. Well, candles were lit that was actually used as a beacon to the winter god, so that during the evenings he would see those lights fly over and come around your house and bless the people inside of the house in your home for welcoming him back in. This is why the candles were used, and to this very day we're still using these seasonal lights. We've got electric lights, so we've modernized the practice of welcoming back the stag god. We put them around the tree, we'll put them in the windows, and we have these massive displays outside in which these lights, according to the ancient occult practice now, is supposed to welcome back onto the earth the winter god. Now, part of the practice of Christmas is hanging, first of all, is the Yule log fire. Now this, the log inside of it is referred to as the Yule log. Now it's not called Yule for no reason at all. Remember, this is December 21st, the human night sacrifice of Yule. Now, tradition teaches us in the occult, no longer me because I'm a born-again Christian, God be praised, but tradition in the occult teaches that, first of all, the Yule log should be made out of birch. Once it has been lit and used for the holidays, you're supposed to keep one part of the birch log or the Yule log and set it aside for next year. Why you do this is because you're supposed to take that piece of the Yule log from last year and light this year's Yule log. This way, it's a constant cycle. You take from the old, give to the new keeps rekindling itself over and over again. This, symbolically speaking, is the cycle of reincarnation, because every year you welcome back into your home by lighting the Yule log, the god of the winter known as the stag god, or originally known as Nimrod. Now, what could possibly be so ungodly about kissing underneath